Everyone, welcome to my channel. Today we are talking about a story collection from Jataka Tells. The title of today's story is Brahmadatta and Banyan Deer. It's a Buddhist story. In our today's discussion, we shall be introducing the story at a glance. There will be summary, analysis, and explanation of some parts of the text. I'm sure you'll accompany me till the end of this video. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe my channel. If you have been watching it as a regular viewer, please don't forget to share it among your friends. Okay, here we go with the introduction. This title is Brahmadatta and Banyan Deer. Source of this story is Jataka Tells, and this is tale number 12 among 547 stories. And this story is related to the Buddhism, and the genre here is a fiction. So, and this is ancient tales. Subgenre ancient tale. Setting Varanasi, Benares in India. Plot: when the king of Banyan deer moves with pity and compassion to a pregnant deer, he agrees and goes himself to be hunted to the king. The king recognizes him as one of the two deer he promised not to be harmed. He learns from Banyan deer the reasons for his sacrifice. Later, king feels compassion towards them and stops killing animals. The characters in the story are king of Banyan deer, a king of bronze deer, pregnant doe, king of people, that Brahmadatta, cook, king's men, and subjects of Kashi. Okay. Here is a very short summary of the story. To prevent a doe and her unborn fawn from being killed, the Buddha offers his own life. The king, greatly moved by this act of generosity, abandons hunting and agrees to protect all living creatures. It means, in this particular story, Brahmadatta and Banyan deer, the Banyan deer is a golden deer and the leader of his horde who steps into the execution altar to save a mother deer from being sacrificed for a human king who loves to hunt. His compassion pleases the king, who not only lets the Banyan deer go, but also spares the lives of all the deer. Here we have a detailed summary. In a forest on the outskirts of Benares, there lived a beautiful golden deer. He was called King Banyan Deer and was the leader of a herd of 500 deer. Not very far off, in the same forest was King Bronze Deer, who was also a leader among another 500 deer. He was also extremely beautiful, with a coat of shiny golden hue and sparkling eyes. Outside the beautiful forest in the real world, there reigned a king who loved to eat meat and every single meal. At every single meal, he would like to have the meat of the deer. He was King Brahmadatta of Banaras. Not only was he fond of hunting, but also he enforced the same on his subjects. He forced them to leave their own business and join him regularly on his hunting spree each and every morning. After a while, the villagers got sick of this regular routine as they had much better things to do with their lives. Besides, their work and means of livelihood had also begun to suffer. They realized that they must find a solution. Together, they came up with a plan. They decided to grow plants, sow crops, and dig water holes in the royal park itself. Then they would drive a number of deer into the confines of the park and shut the gates. In this way, the king could hunt at leisure and would not require any further help from his obedient subjects. So, at first, they went about preparing the royal park for a deer. Then they went into the forest armed with weapons and sticks in order to drive the deer into the royal park. They surrounded the territories of both the hordes, those of King Banyan as well as King Brandsdeer, and drove them into the royal park with shouts of glee as they beat their sticks on the ground and waved them in the air. As soon as both the hordes were in, the gates were shut and the deer entrapped. Then they went to their king and told him that as they could not accompany him any more on his subjects' haunts, they had succeeded or successfully managed to entrap a number of deer into the royal park for his royal pleasure. The king was absolutely thrilled when he set eyes on the great number of deer in the royal park. While gazing at them, his eyes fell on the two beautiful golden deer, and he at once decided to spare their lives. He issued an order that they were not to be shot at any cost. Each day after that, either the king or one of his hunters would shoot arrows at the deer. The deer would scatter wildly at every direction and get hurt in the ensuing stampede. So one day, King Banyan deer and King Bronze deer put their heads together and came up with a plan. They realized that each day their herds were getting wounded in great numbers, and some were getting killed. Even though death was inevitable, they could at least try to save the living ones from unnecessary pain and torture. So they decided to send a deer to the royal palace to be slaughtered and served to the king each and every day. The fact was to alternate between the two herds. In this way, at least the rest of the deer would be spared unnecessary torture. This system continued for some time. Each day a deer was sent to the royal palace to be slaughtered by the royal cook, and the rest of the deer were allowed to live in peace until it was their turn. One day it was the turn of a young female deer with a newborn baby. She belonged to the herd of King Bran's deer. She was worried that after she killed, there would be no one to take over her child, who was still too young to look after itself. So she approached her king with the plea that he sent another deer instead of her that day, and she would willingly go to the slaughter after her fawn was old enough to look after himself. But Bran's deer would not listen. King Bran's deer would not listen to her plea and told her to accept this as her fate, as he could not ask another deer to replace her on the execution block. The mother doe looked at her baby and just could not take a step towards the palace. So she approached King Banyan Deer with her plea. King Banyan Deer looked at her with great compassion and told her to look after her baby as he would send another in her place. Then King Banyan Deer himself walked to the palace and placed his head on the execution block. The royal king's the royal cook was shocked to see him and remembered the king's orders, and he went running to the king to ask him what was to be done. The king came down to see what was happening. On seeing King Banyan Deer, he went up to him and gently asked why he was here. Why he was there. King Banyan Deer related the story of the fawn and the mother doe and told him that as he could not order another to take her place, he had decided to do it himself. The king was highly impressed with his supreme sacrifice and the great love of compassion, and that this king of deer possessed. So he decided to not only spare his life, but that of the mother doe as well. But King Banyan was not satisfied. He asked that the lives of the other deer be spared as well. So the king granted him his wish. Then he asked about all the other four-footed animals in the forest, and then about the birds in the sky and the fish in the sea. And King Brahmadatta agreed to spare the lives of all. King Banyan deer thanked him from the bottom of his heart and returned joyfully to the park. The gates were opened wide and both the herds were set free. Needless to say, they lived peacefully and happily ever after. Okay, that's all the summary of Banyan deer and Brahmadatta in English. Now, let's have the summary or discussion in Nepali. ब्रह्मदत्त र बन्यान हरिण राजको कथा यो बुद्ध धर्मसँग सम्बन्धित जातक कथाहरू मध्येको एउटा कथा हो। ब्रह्मदत्त र बन्यान हरिणको यो जुन कथा अहिले हाम्रो कक्षा 12 को ऐच्छिक अङ्ग्रेजीमा समावेश गरिएछ नेपालमा। यस कथामा जनावर र मानिस पात्रहरूको बीच भएका र हुने धेरै प्रसङ्गहरू समेटिएको छ। जनावरहरू मानिस जस्तै बोल्ने, मानिससँगै अन्तर्क्रिया गर्ने, आफ्नो दुःख सुखका कुराहरू एक आपसमा गर्ने र जनावरको समूहका नायिकाले मान्छेको जस्तो व्यवहार गर्ने, अन्याय, अत्याचार, त्रास, धम्की, बल प्रयोग, हिंसा र हत्या हुने अवस्थाबाट गुज्रिन बेलामा भगवान बुद्धले हरिणको अवतार लिई एक हरिण नेताले गरेको अन्याय र कानुनको व्याख्याका कारण एउटा मात्र हरिणको मृत्यु हुने पालोमा दोजिया बच्चा सहितको हरिणले अनाहकमा ज्यान गुमाउनु बाध्य हुनुपर्ने अवस्था सिर्जना भएको अवस्थामा बन्यान समूहको हरिण राजले आफू सुलीमा चढेर पनि त्यो दोजिया हरिणको पुकार सुनि उसको बच्चा जन्माउने र हुर्काउने चाहनालाई पुरा गर्न दिएको बलिदान र राजा ब्रह्मदत्तले हरिणका दुई नायिकालाई कुनै पनि प्रकारको आक्रमण र क्षति नपुर्याउन भनी आफ्ना भाइ भारदारहरू र सिकारीहरूलाई गरेको प्रतिज्ञाबाट र निर्देशनबाट बाँच्न पुगेको बन्यान समूहको राजाले किन आफूलाई मात्र अभयदान दिएको? यो नौटङ्की किन रच्नु पर्यो? राजाले दिने हो भने राज्यमा भएका सबै हरिण लगायत यहाँका जलचर, थलचर, चराचर, मुसाचर, यहाँका माछा, यहाँका चाहिँ अन्य जङ्गली जन्तुहरूदेखि लिएर कीट पतङ्ग सबैले राजाको त्यो दया, करुणा र सहानुभूति किन नपाउने भनी माग गर्दा राजा ब्रह्मदत्तलाई बन्यान हरिणको माग जायज लागेछ र राजाले आफ्नो राज्यमा भएका कुनै पनि जीवजन्तु, चराचुरुङ्गी, कीट पतङ्ग, माछा लगायत सर्प, कुनै पनि जनावरको हत्या नगर्ने र सबैलाई मानिस जस्तै स्वतन्त्र जीवन जिउन दिएको राजाज्ञाबाट सबै प्राणी जगतले पाएको स्वतन्त्रताबाट बुद्धको हरिण अवतारको कारण हो भन्ने प्रसङ्गलाई यस कथामा बडो रोचक तरिकाले प्रस्तुत गरिएको छ। अति सरल र काव्यात्मक भाषामा अति मन बहलाउने गरी विभिन्न बिम्ब प्रतीकहरूको प्रयोग गरेर यो कथामा एउटा दर्शक अथवा श्रोतालाई चाहिँ त्यस्तै खालको रोचकता प्रदान गर्ने प्रयास गरिएको छ। त्यो एउटा यसको लेखकीय पाटोको एउटा चाहिँ महत्त्वपूर्ण पाटो हो। यो रेफ मार्टिनले यो बुद्धको जातक कथालाई चाहिँ आफ्नो भाषामा यसरी चाहिँ एउटा आफ्नो तरिकाले अङ्ग्रेजी भाषामा यसरी गरेको एउटा रोचक प्रस्तुति एउटा पठन योग्य र बोधगम्य पनि छ। अब यहाँ चाहिँ के छ भन्दाखेरि आफूलाई अहिंसाको मार्ग रोज्न प्रेरित गरेको बन्यान हरिणको ठुलो स्मारक दरबारको मुख्य स्थानमा बनाएर लगाएर राजा ब्रह्मदत्तले आफ्नो शान्ति प्रेमी र अहिंसाको पुजारी छविलाई आम मानव र प्राणी जगतमा उच्च रूपमा कदर हुने काम गरेकोमा राजा ब्रह्मदत्तको आत्मानुभूति र करुणा मुक्त कण्ठले गुणगान गाइएको पाइन्छ। कथा अनुसार त्यहाँ पात्रहरू यस प्रकार छन्। खास चाहिँ बनारसको राजा ब्रह्मदत्त, बन्यान समूहको हरिण राजा, अनि अर्को एन्टलर डियर अथवा हाँगा फाटेको सिङ भएको समूहको हरिणको राजा, अनि दोजिया हरिण, राजाका मान्छे, राजाको भान्से र आम नागरिक। यहाँ अरू भारदार राज्यका प्रजा लगायत सबै पात्रहरू पनि छन्, तर यो कथाको शीर्षक पात्र बन्यान हरिण हो र उसको त्याग, बलिदान, समर्पण र चेतना अनि तिनै विशेष गुणहरूको कारण राजालाई अहिंसा र शान्तिको मार्ग रोज्ने बनाउने अलौकिक र अद्भुत क्षमताको बढी चर्चा हुन्छ। बनारसको राजा ब्रह्मदत्त बारम्बार धनुबाण बोकेर घोडसवार भई जङ्गलमा शिकार खेल्न जान्थे। उनको शिकारको क्रममा अब उनका नागरिकहरू पनि पछि पछि लाएर जानु पर्थ्यो, चाहे तिनीहरूको चाहिँ धान पाकोस् या चाहिँ रोपाइँ गर्ने बेला होस्, चाहे त्यहाँ राजा आएर जाने भनेपछि त्यहाँ सबैको आफ्नो घरको चाहिँ धन्दासन्दा सबै छोडेर जानु पर्थ्यो। अनि यसरी जाँदाखेरि राजासहित चाहिँ शिकार खेल्न जाँदाखेरि धेरै जनावरहरू घाइते हुन्थे, अपाङ्ग हुन्थे, त्रसित हुन्थे, भयभीत हुन्थे, भागदौडमा कति चाहिँ घाइते हुन्थे, लड्थे, अनाहकमा तिनीहरूको ज्यान हुन्थ्यो। तर राजाले ती जनावरको पीडाप्रति कुनै सकारात्मक भावना थिएन, कुनै सहानुभूति, आत्मानुभूति केही पनि थिएन। उनलाई हरिण अथवा जराएको मासु खान पाइपुग्यो। जङ्गलमा 2 बथानका हरिण बस्थे। प्रत्येक बथानमा 500 हरिणहरू थिए। तिनीहरूका आफ्ना एउटा राजा त्यहाँ नाइके थिए। अनि उनीहरू एक आपसमा झैझगडा पनि गर्दैनथे। त्यो मान्छेको निर्दयी राजा भने ब्रह्मदत्त त्रास र भयबाट उम्किने बाटो के हुनसक्छ, अब योबाट चाहिँ कसरी बाँच्न सकिन्छ भनेर उनीहरू सोध्थे। एक दिन यी 2 बन्यान समूहका नाइके, अब बन्यान समूहको नाइके र अर्को चाहिँ अब एन्टलर समूहको नाइके, सिंह भएको जुन जराय समूहको नाइके बीच गम्भीर छलफल भयो र उनीहरूले आफूहरूमाथि भएका राज्यको ज्यादती असह्य भएको निष्कर्ष निकाले। यसको लागि उनीहरूले एउटा व्यवस्था गर्ने भए, जसअनुसार उनीहरूले गोला थोत्नु पर्ने भयो र गोला प्रथा अनुसार दिनमा 1 हरिणले राजाको आहारा बन्न सुलीमा आफ्नो घाँटी लगेर गिडिन जानुपर्ने भयो। यसरी जाँदा अरू हरिणहरूको अनाहकमा दौड, त्रास, भय, भागदौड यस्तो, अनि त्यसपछि अनावश्यक चाहिँ रूपमा चाहिँ उनीहरूलाई त्रसित भएर बाँच्नको लागि चाहिँ भाग्नुपर्ने अवस्था नहुने भयो। एक दिन त मर्नु नै पर्छ, तर अरू बाँचुन्जेल राम्रैसँग बाँच्ने अवस्था आउने भयो भनेर सबैले चाहिँ यसलाई स्वीकारे। अब यसरी जाँदाखेरि अब बन्यान समूहको नाइके र अर्को समूहको जुन एन्टलर समूहको नाइकेको बिचमा के भयो त भन्दा पालो, आज बन्यान समूहको पालो भने अर्को भोलिपल्ट अर्को समूहको पालो। अनि त्यो पालोमा त्यहाँ त्यो समूहको एकजना त्यहाँबाट छानिनु पर्थ्यो, जसलाई राजा कहाँ जाने भनेर त्यहाँ तोकिएको हुन्छ एउटा सङ्केत, त्यो जान्थ्यो। अरूलाई चाहिँ अब त्यो दिन बाँचियो भन्ने हुन्थ्यो र अरूलाई केही पनि हुँदैन थियो। अरूलाई चाहिँ भागदौड पनि गर्नु पर्दैन थियो, अरूलाई चाहिँ अब आज केही त्रास पनि हुँदैन थियो। अब चाहिँ त्यो एउटा मर्ने दिन कुर्नु पर्थ्यो, बाँचुन्जेल ठिकै थियो, एक दिन त मर्नु नै छ। अनि यसरी चाहिँ पालो पालेर गरेर जाने कुरामा सबै सहमत भए। अनि हरिणहरूको लागि यो किन, अनि तिनीहरूले त्यो हरिणहरूलाई चाहिँ उनीहरूले के पनि बनाइदिएको थियो भने त्यहाँका बनारसका नागरिकहरूले अब त्यो यस्तो खालको चाहिँ एउटा पार्क, डियर पार्क भन्छ, हरिण पार्क, त्यहाँ हरिण मात्रै हुन्थे। अनि त्योभन्दा बाहिर चाहिँ हरिण खोज्नलाई चाहिँ राजा जानु पर्दैन थियो। जुन हरिणलाई उनले चाहिँ शिकार गर्न मन लाग्यो त्यसैलाई शिकार गर्दै खान्थे। राजाले मन परी बाण चलाउँदाखेरि अब धेरै अत्तालिने, घाइते हुने, अङ्गभङ्ग हुने त्रासबाट र अरू केही दिन त्राण पाउने भए। ब्रह्मदत्त आफ्नो बुढो भइसकेको र शिकार खेल्न कठिन भइरहेको समय सजिलै नियमित 1 हरिणको मासु दिनौँ खान पाउने अवस्थाले उसलाई सजिलो बनाइदिएको थियो। दिनौँ शिकार गर्न राजाको अघि पछि लाग्दा मान्छेहरूको, जुन त्यहाँका नागरिकहरूको घरधन्दा र अन्य नियमित काम छोडेर राजाको पछि लाग्न नभ्याउने र प्रजाहरूले हरिण जरायोलाई अन्यत्र उम्किन पनि नदिने एक बृहत् खोर बनाए। त्यो मैले पहिले भनिसकेको छु, जहाँबाट हरिणहरू उम्कन नसकुन् र शिकार खेल्न राजालाई सहज होस्। यसरी सबै प्रबन्ध गरिएको थियो। राजाको शिकार नियमित भइरहेको थियो। एक दिन 1 हरिण आफ्नो चिट्ठा अनुसार, एक पोथी हरिण आफ्नो चिट्ठा अनुसार राजाको हरिण मांस भोजन पुगेकै थियो। एक दिन दोजिया हरिणको पालो आएछ। उसले आफ्नो राजा समक्ष, जुन यो बन्यान समूहको भन्दा अर्को समूहको चाहिँ हरिणको कुरा हो यो, बिन्ती बिसाइछन्। उनले सहमतिमा एकजना हरिण जानुपर्ने र आफ्नो पेटमा जन्मिने बेलाको बच्चा भएको र त्यो बच्चा हुर्काउन कोही पनि नभएको हुनाले आफू बच्चा जन्माएर हुर्काएपछि मात्र आफ्नो पालोमा जान राजाको भोजन हुन तयार रहेको बताए। तर उनको राजाले कानुन भनेको कानुन हो, तिम्रो साटो म अरू हरिणलाई चाहिँ जबरजस्ती पठाउन सक्दिनँ, तिमी जानै पर्छ। यहाँ मलाई अनावश्यक तर्कका साथ चाहिँ तनाव नदेऊ, तिम्रो कुरा सुन्नु छैन, तिमी आफ्नो बाटो लाग भनेर भनेपछि त्यो स्त्री हरिणलाई बडा दुःख लाग्यो। अब न्याय यहाँ नपाए अर्को ठाउँ पनि पाइन्छ कि भनेर एउटा आशाको त्यान्द्र बोकेर बन्यानसम्मको राजा समक्ष गएर आफ्नो बिन्ती बिसाइन् उनले। राजालाई उनको तर्क न्यायोचित लागेर उनको पुकार सुनेर बन्यान राज हरिणले उनको चाहना पुरा गर्न बाटो खुला गरिदिए। तर कसलाई पठाउनु? पालो थुत्दा आफूलाई पालो नपरेका हरिणलाई जबरजस्ती राजाको सुलीमा पठाउन नमिल्ने, त्यो एउटा न्यायले पनि नदिने, अन्याय गर्न नमिल्ने भएको हुनाले बन्यान राजा आफै शिकार गिन्ने तरबार ठाउँ पुगे। राजाको भान्से र राजाको मान्छेले त्यो देख्यो र उसले हत्तरपत्तर राजालाई बन्यान हरिण शिकारको रूपमा आएको बिन्ती बिसायो। तर राजाले उक्त ठाउँमा पुगेर आफ्नो पुरानो प्रतिज्ञा दोहोऱ्याए। एउटी दोजिया हरिणको उनको बच्चा जन्माएर आफू सुलीमा चढ्ने आग्रहलाई आफूले स्वीकार गरेको कुरा बताएपछि राजा ब्रह्मदत्तलाई मनमा करुणा र दया जाग्यो। उनले बन्यान हरिण राजलाई क्षमा दिए र बन्यानले आफूलाई मात्र होइन समग्र हरिण लगायत वन्य जन्तु, माछा, जलचर, चराचुरुङ्गी, कीट पतङ्ग सबैलाई स्वतन्त्र जीवन जिउन दिनुपर्ने भन्ने माग राखे। बन्यान हरिणको आग्रह ब्रह्मदत्तलाई जायज लागेछ र उनले साई घोषणा गरे, साई सम्बोधन गरे र झ्याली पिटाए र सन्देश सर्वत्र पार्न, त्यो उसको बनारस राज्यको सबै ठाउँमा सर्वत्र पार्न आदेश दिए। अब उनको राज्यमा कसैले शिकार खेल्दैन, कसैले कुनै जनावर, कीट पतङ्ग कसैको हत्या गर्दैन। सबले स्वतन्त्र जीवन जिउँछन्। जलचर, थलचर, चराचर, मुसाचर सबैले आफ्नो स्वतन्त्र जीवन जिउन अरू कसैको त्रास भए आतङ्क मान्नु पर्दैन। अब सबै प्राणीको स्वतन्त्र भई बाँच्ने जनावरको अधिकार स्थापित हुन्छ। बन्यान हरिणको दया, करुणा, समर्पण देखेर राजा ब्रह्मदत्तको आँखा खुल्यो अनि ती राजाले घोषणा गरे बमोजिम ती पार्कमा थुनिएका ती हरिणहरू सबै स्वतन्त्र भए। सब कसैसँग नडराइकन स्वतन्त्र जीवन जिउन थाले। घरि मान्छेको आडा जान्छन्, घरि कहाँ जान्छन्, घरि कस कहाँ जान्छन्। उनीहरूले स्वतन्त्र जीवन, उनले चिताउँदै नचिताएको जीवन, एउटा त्यस्तो खालको जीवन जिउन पाइयो भनेर खुसी हुन्छन्। यो खुसी देख्दाखेरि राजालाई पनि एउटा यस्तो खालको चाहिँ भावना उत्पन्न हुन्छ। अनि उनले चाहिँ त्यो दया, माया, सहानुभूति, आत्मानुभूति, उदारता, मित्रताले कसरी अरूलाई पनि स्वतन्त्र जीवन जिउन सक्छ भन्ने जनावरबाट सिकेको ज्ञानको प्रसार गरे र त्यसरी आफ्नो आँखा खोल्ने हरिण राज बन्यानको स्मारक किन बनाए भन्ने कुरा यस कथाबाट प्रष्ट हुन्छ। यसरी बुद्धले एउटा चाहिँ हरिणको अवतार लिँदा कसरी चाहिँ एउटा हिंसावादी मान्छेलाई अहिंसाको बाटो रोज्न सकिन्छ र त्यस्तो हिंसाको चाहिँ एउटा पुजारीलाई अहिंसाको पुजारी बनाउने, शान्ति प्रेमी बनाउने मान्छे कसरी बनाउन सकिन्छ भन्ने कुरा यो कथाबाट यहाँ प्रष्ट हुन्छ। Okay, here we go with the analysis. Brahmadatta and Banyan deer is a Buddhist story. The present story is an animal story from the Jataka tales. The Buddha was born as a Banyan deer and to sacrifice his own life to prevent a doe and her unborn fawn from being killed. The king was greatly moved by this act of generosity. In other words, the Banyan deer and the hero of the story becomes successful to change King Brahmadatta's attitude towards life, towards animal. It is a story of compassion highlighting courage, triumph, and the meaning of wisdom, and shows that the lives of all living beings are equally important. In all the Jataka stories, hero ultimately becomes successful in the mission. Brahmadatta and Banyan deer is a Buddhist story retold by Ref Martin. In Buddhism, the deer symbolizes harmony, happiness, longevity, and peace. There are Tibetan legends in which deer help men to solve problems. When a male and female deer are represented together, it is direct allusion to the first teachings of Buddha near Banaras. This story reflects how the king of human beings, Brahmadatta, feels compassion to a pregnant deer. He agrees and goes himself to be hunted for the king. The king recognizes him as one of the two deer he promised never to harm. When the king learns why Banyan leader is offering himself, he feels compassion It is believed that the Banyan leader would one day become Buddha to give his own life to save that another. Okay, this is all the analysis. Now, here we go with some questions. Why was stockade built by the people? Give reason. The people were not pleased by the royal hunt, as the fields had been ruined and they had been forced to leave off their work in order to beat the jungles and the hidden beasts towards the waiting king and his men. So they built a stock deep in the forest to trap deer so that the king could hunt all he wanted without ruining their fields or forcing them to leave their shops or business. Who were the leaders of the two herds? Were they same or different in case of Cain and love? The leaders of two herds were the king of the Banyan deer and branch deer king. They were not same in the case of kind and love, generosity. The branch deer king was not kind enough. He was cruel. He could not spare the pregnant deer, so he talked about law and justice. His law and justice was not for law and justice itself. It was just a kind of activity, a kind of weapon to punish, or weapon to show his unjust or unjust nature. He did not listen to request or plea of the pregnant deer, but the king of the Banyan deer, filled with pity by the request of the pregnant deer, and became ready to go to be hunted in her turn. He was kind, so he went himself to save the death of two. What is king's last proclamation and decree? Why did he come to this decision? When the king of Banyan deer moves with pity and compassion to a pregnant deer, he agrees and goes himself to be hunted to the king. The king recognizes him as one of the two deer he promised never to harm. When the king learns why Banyan leader is offering himself, he feels compassion. The king, greatly moved by this act of generosity, abandons hunting and agrees to protect all living creatures. He comes to this conclusion by the kind nature of the king of Banyan deer towards other. The Banyan deer king convinces him that all the creatures of the land are the friends and the values of all their of all of their lives is equal. So there is no difference between human beings and animals. All are living beings, and all's lives are important. To prevent a doe and her unborn fawn from being killed, the branch deer king offers his own life. To prevent a doe and her unborn fawn from being killed, the Banyan deer king offers his own life. The king, greatly moved by this act of generosity, abandons hunting and agrees to protect all living creatures. As the deer, do you see people in your community who sacrifice life for others? Relate your experience. Human being is a rational animal, embodied with human qualities like love, compassion, cooperation, kindness, and friendship. However, we don't find people with generosity as the king of Banyan deer, who offers his own life to prevent a doe and her unborn fawn from being killed. Although there are some religious people who have love, pity, and generosity, they cannot also sacrifice life for others. As each individual has the importance of their life, it is rare that one can give his or her life for another. Help, wealth, money, land, etc. are found to be given but not life. As people are being more materialistic these days, we don't find any people in our communities like Banyan deer in this Jataka tells. Okay, that's all with the discussion of the Banyan deer and Brahmadatta. I'm sure you got the points. If you have any comments, please put your ideas in my comment box. I will be back with another important educational video. Till then, have a nice time. Thank you very much for your time and patience.